Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Fireside Chat. We are joined today on the main stage by Flora McCrone and Jimmy Vainstein. Flora is the lead for immersive interactions at the World Economic Forum's Center for Nature and Climate. The Economic Forum is a nonprofit organization that aims to improve the state of the world by engaging business, political, and academic leaders across sectors to address global challenges such as those related to climate change, healthcare, and economic inequality. Jimmy leads the interactive media program at the World Bank. World Bank is an international financial institution that provides financial and technical support to developing countries to promote economic growth and reduce poverty. My name is Lori-Lee Elliott, and I will be your moderator today. And as mentioned, I first attended AWE back in 2018 in Santa Clara to pitch my startup Dauntless, which provides live extended reality digital twins to organizations like NASA, the Air Force, and Space Force. And that was back in 2018, and I'm honored now to be sitting here down with so many XR leaders. Before we get into the fireside chat, Flora and Jimmy will provide a brief overview of their respective programs, just to give you an idea of what they're working on and how their organizations are using extended reality to support poverty reduction and environmental initiatives around the world through enhancing learning and collaboration across international organizations and their audiences. And Flora, would you like to go first?
Hi, everyone. Whoa, that is loud. I'm Flora McCrone from the World Economic Forum, as you just heard, and I lead on all the extended reality, nature and climate content for the forum. I believe that we're at a fork in the road where emerging technologies like extended reality can really have a positive impact on our planet and nature and climate. And I'm borrowing this next part from the opening session on Tuesday, but I believe that our planet needs emerging tech as much as emerging tech needs our planet. So what we wanted to do was establish an overarching problem. So this is the one that really means something to me, which is that global temperatures in the last 12 months have exceeded 1.58 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, so exceeding that 1.5 degree threshold that we all hear about. And this is linked to climate hazards, so this is things like extreme heat, wildfires like the one in LA earlier this year, droughts, floods, which, as I'm sure you're aware, are seeming to become more frequent and more intense. As well as this, that we have Earth system tipping points. And if you don't know, a tipping point is when a system moves from one state of equilibrium into another. So it could be things like in the polar regions, ice melting to water. And once that tipping point is triggered, there's no going back. So it really causes issues for not only nature, but our societies as well. But what did the World Economic Forum want to do through emerging tech? And what's the problem they wanted to solve? And what we realized is that, I don't think you can see it because I'm covering the screen, but global decision makers didn't realize didn't have a full understanding of the severity of issues caused by climate hazards and system tipping points to their profits and other pieces of their work. So what's the solution that emerging technology, particularly extended reality, can help us with? So we can bring participants closer to the environments in question. We can act as a bridge between the latest science and business risks and societal risks. We could utilize the existing high-level audiences through our events. For example, Davos, which is you might have heard of, which is our annual meeting location every year. We can work closely with respected experts to ensure integrity of what we're building. And we can finally catalyze collective action by bringing together the policy, business, and civil society leaders. So here we go, I'm starting a video now. But what we did is we firstly partnered with Accenture and Microsoft Mesh to build the Global Collaboration Village. And we wanted this to be a laboratory for immersive convening. And this was, as you can see, was a virtual reality-based metaverse with avatars, and it was accessible on Meta Quest devices. And this was one of our key environments, the Climate Tipping Points Hub. That's why I was giving you all that information before. And we built it off that problem, and this was the solution we came up with. And thousands of leaders have been through this environment through our events, including Davos, New York Climate Week, and in other areas. Just letting it run a second. Okay. And then what we moved on to do, more recently in January, we launched a new pilot, which is a slight iteration on the original version of the Global Collaboration Village, this time built in-house by none other than Devesh, who's in the audience. And we built this in Unity to produce an augmented reality or spatial computing-based environment this time, and really utilizing AI as we did it. And I'm going to play the video. Sorry if you can't see the wording, but it's just an overview of the type of topic that can work in this environment and the technologies we can use. And what we wanted to do was broaden device access, because as I mentioned before, we could only use our original environment on MetaQuest, but we've got this on the Apple Vision Pro and can be on MetaQuest devices as well. And we also took on feedback that we got regularly from participants in terms of the first iteration about the graphics, about virtual reality, and using a kind of an avatar-led collaborative environment. So we built on that, and what you'll see is it's augmented reality instead, and very, very crisp graphics thanks to Devesh. And that was just a little snapshot of what we have done. I would let this run to the end, but I don't want to go over my time. But if you have any questions, and this was me 2 days ago at AWE, and it looks rather large on the screen, but I thought I'd add that in there. Thank you.
Yeah, we don't want to mix mics on this. All right, now for the fun part of this panel, because just kidding. Okay, so I'm Jamie Vainstein. I'm from the World Bank. We've been doing VR and AR since 2014. So I was actually on AWE in 2015, and it was crazy, you know, seeing how we have evolved and all the technology and all the trial and error that has been done, and then coming in 2025 and then seeing that we're exactly where we started, kind of still testing new things and playing around, but very exciting to have such a big community of creators. So that's the first week we got the Apple Vision Pro at the bank, so we've been testing XR since then and trying to showcase the potential of what VR can do for the world and poverty reduction initiatives, which is what the World Bank does. The World Bank, if you don't know, it's one of the largest international organizations in the world, similar to the UN in a way. And there's so much potential into how we can transport somebody to any of these places and letting them see how others are living and then what they can do about it. And it's a little bit of how we started seeing the impact of XR back in the day when we were looking at documentaries in Jordanian refugee camps and things like that, and see the potential of what if we use this for our everyday use. So we started sending cameras into the field and then talking to people all the time. So we had photos of people with Gear VRs and cardboards, and then funny enough, we're still doing this up to today and getting anybody. So this is us in front of the cafeteria of the World Bank in DC, just getting people in headsets and convince them before, you know, leave your tray on the side and get an Apple Vision Pro on your head, and then they see the potential, and we kind of get these projects off the ground so we can work with experts in water, in agriculture, in anything that you can think of, transport, education, and then do all these projects that we can. So we build our own capacity and started giving cameras to these experts that know nothing about VR or media or take photos, and we train them on basically take this camera on mission with you when you're traveling. This is in Zimbabwe about a project on irrigation for agriculture fields, and they come back with these amazing images after we train them for an hour and give them a tripod, a GoPro 360 or an Insta, and a hard drive maybe, and off they go. And then after that, we have all the media we want to actually put it in a VR experience and then do something meaningful with it, instead of them just writing a black and white report that maybe somebody would read, right? So, and that's how we keep evolving, and now, up to now, we're now doing things that are super high level, a beautiful team of all the skills you can think of. This is an example of what we're doing with mixed reality this fall at the World Bank annual meetings, in which we had a whole data visualization experience where you can click on, in this case, energy points or water aspects or very difficult data to understand, but when you are in the headset, then you can play with this, you can connect and know that there's actually people behind this data, and then you get a line of people that want to try and maybe try VR for the first time and have some type of impact through it. So very excited about that and the quality that you can do right now with any headset and any platform. So we're trying to be very agnostic in that regard. So very excited about that aspect. This is another one we did for data about fragility, which is countries affected by war and difficult situations. And then you basically have them click on something. In this case, they click on the climate adaptation link, and then after that, then it starts raining inside the World Bank building. So you're surrounded by water and mud, and then data. So as soon as you click on any of the pillars, then the whole environment changes again, and you kind of play around with that. So it's an economist dream to play with data. And I'm not an economist. So, or visualizing things that are so hard to do, in this case, debt, right? So this beautifully created team we have in-house, trying to see, okay, what can we do to visualize that? And in this case, is an infographic of something very heavy that you're pulling together while you're clicking on the data. So that's, no other medium can do that for you, and we're very excited about that aspect. We do a lot of documentaries as well. This is one about cyclones and environment issues happening in Mozambique, and then affecting education systems where you can be in this house. We transported somebody, basically any user, into this house and recreated with photogrammetry this house that was affected by the cyclone, because we couldn't be there when the cyclone hit, right? And then we did a whole 3D simulation so you can feel how it is to be in a house while it's being hit. And then we follow this girl that goes to show you how they're doing classes outside and with no infrastructure, so very impactful. And then after that, we do a lot of web-based stuff as well, trying to be more inclusive of the content of things that we do. We do a lot of HR training as well, so we're trying to get all the spectrum of everything you can think of in a large enterprise that can do VR. So this is an example of one we're about to launch in the fall that will take you to boosting the staffing culture and dealing with stress and neurodivergency. And this is amazing. I'll let it run a little bit. And you can see how you are in these situations when you don't know how you're affecting your own colleagues, or understanding their challenges. This is actually drawn inside VR and animated inside VR by excellent artists, and but all done by the feedback of staff that we interview and get all the information before we create these scenarios for HR training. So everything is very factual and very unique, tailored to the institution itself. And then to close on my nice video roll around, we do a lot of immersive exhibits as well. So every time somebody wants to do something, then we create an immersive environment, start to think about spatial design, right? But what if we bring this spatial design outside of the headsets? And then in this case, we did an exhibit with printed cubes that have all these pillars the bank was pushing and showcasing for one of the biggest meetings. And then when you scan the QR code with AR, then the cube actually opens up, and you can see inside this cube, and you have a 3D animation through it. So any excuse to use AR, we use it, and we're very proud, usually, of the work that we put out. There you go. That's it. That's my 5 minutes.
Thank you both for sharing about what you have been working on with XR. And between the two of you, we covered quite a few different use cases, and we talked about a lot of different types of data. So I was wondering if you could talk about, based on your experience across these initiatives, what types of data are good candidates for bringing into XR, whether that's augmented, mixed, or virtual reality?
Okay, well, I think I'm biased, and I might have made it a bit clearer in my presentation, but I think what works really well in this medium is complex, dense, scientific data, the latest data, because we can make it tangible in a way that a news article or a scientific paper just really can't. So I feel like that works really nicely, and because you can be immersed directly in the content, and particularly for World Economic Forum audiences, they might not have an understanding of these topics at all, so bringing them right into that content, into the quite maybe scary data, I think that works really nicely.
Yeah, I think that it's the data you can visualize, that there's something that you can look at it in a full database set and you can distill to something that can be meaningful. That's the data you want to take into XR. And then the data that can have a storytelling behind and that you can visualize that there's somebody behind these numbers. That if you look at the data, it's not data per se, it's the whole story, and then how can we interact with something that is telling me something and any impactful aspects and call to action with it. So.
You each said something that was quite interesting. So dense data, when you were talking about climate data and things that might be difficult to visualize, like in my case, we deal with a lot of space data, which is inherently difficult to picture in your head. And then you mentioned storytelling. So can you talk a little bit about how storytelling has played a role in both of your projects and how or why you see it as critical or not?
I mean, in our case, we put in storytelling on everything that we do, essentially, and we try to talk to people that are very abstract and technical, think economists and agriculture experts or things like that, and then how can we convert that into story points? And we go and create a full script that can be immersive on assets that we can touch, things that you can feel. So it's really about that, on creating that empathy and connection with the subjects that you're putting in, and then seeing if we can send cameras out in the field and get real footage. But if not, we can create a kind of a museum-style experience that have a strong user experience. So we're doing our best on that.
Brilliant. So from my point of view, I would say storytelling is all about the audience. As I just mentioned, the World Economic Forum's audience is quite niche in terms of it's the world's leaders of business and policy. So what we try to do is think about what do they know and what don't they know, and then create stories around that. I quite liked it the other day in another talk that I went to, that someone mentioned this phrase that we need to look at fluidity between interaction and storytelling, and I really like that. So it's how can we adapt our narrative whilst we go along during a session, and maybe this is through AI, we can do it in the future. But I think audience is really key for this.
Speaking of audience, you've both executed XR initiatives that, were quite large scale and stayed maybe in the prototype stage. Looking forward to those projects, can you share some lessons learned and best practices for maybe those out there that are looking at starting their own initiatives? And if time allows, could you also give us your opinion on where you think the XR industry is going next?
Shall I start? So in terms of the learnings, there are many, many learnings, but we can talk to you about that after the session if you're interested. But I would say that I've really learned that XR can be best placed to level the playing field in sessions. So you can have a group of people from all different backgrounds, different industries, different sectors, and you can bring them together in a room collectively, and then discussions can stem from that. So I feel like that's a real learning I've had. So kind of starting from scratch, think about what your audience do and don't know, even if it's a broad audience, and then building from there. And I do feel like the most successful sessions that we've had are when we've collaborated with recognized voices or respected voices in civil society, in policy, in the private sector. So it's those two, I would say, were my key learnings.
Awesome. In our case, I think that has worked really well when we are going for open standards, WebXR. We produced an XR experience that was fully, totally done with web, and all we had to do is share a link, and then you can put it on the headset, you can put it on your computer, you can put it on your mobile, anybody can access. You have all the levels of user experience, and if you want to do it in VR, awesome, and it's going to look super immersive, but that's not limiting our reach. And it took a while to understand that. If you're in an enterprise like that, like ours, is, you kind of get in your own way if you're pushing for VR for the sake of VR, and it's really about understanding why VR and not something else, and don't push it if it doesn't belong, and then you can do a full multimedia approach to the projects that you're doing, and doesn't have to be VR for the sake of it. And web VR and open standards have really allowed us to be flexible that way, and I hope that that's where the industry is going. But we understand that we also need the big players out there to support us, and the ecosystems and bubbles as well. But we hope that accessibility is a really big key, because, and talking about, I think, both institutions, right, and similar, that we don't see, or anybody's talking too much about that, and not to be too righteous, but talking about VR for good, right? We're focusing on AI and the cool glasses and everything, but what are we doing for impactful experiences? What are we doing to help out? What are we doing to be inclusive? And we don't see too much of that. When we live in a world right now, data is like 500, 600 million people with no electricity, right? And so many millions of people with no internet access. So who are we building these things for, right? And how do we help other communities leapfrog technology and leapfrog to be with us? We're talking about AI and job generation and what would happen in the very short term, and we should be thinking about how can we be more global and more accessible on everything that we're trying to build. So that's with that, yeah.
Can I just add to that a little bit? So building on your point about accessibility, I think the next steps for XR are hopefully democratization of content and also access. So something we did through the Global Collaboration Village is we allowed some remote joiners to be with us at our annual meeting in Davos, which is really novel for anyone who knows about it. It's hard to have access there. And this meant that they could be in the room, in the virtual room, with some of the world-leading speakers and participants. So I feel like that's something that XR really can do, is the democratization piece.
It sounds like we have some common themes there, and I think you're absolutely right. Being able to build on OpenXR, use open source, USDE, so that you can really bring your own device and meet the users where they are, rather than trying to force a particular headset or medium on someone. And I think to your point, with all of the advances in AI, like generative AI as well, will hopefully help more people be able to join the developer ecosystem, and we'll be able to create even more apps and more experiences. And have we gone over? I think we're out of time, but thank you everyone for joining us here today. And if anyone has any questions, we will be able to hang around for a little bit, so please come up and say hello and enjoy the rest of AWE.
Thank you.
Thank you.